Call the meeting to order. Lord. If you would all stand and please join Councilmember Lord in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you all please stand, bow our heads? Lord, we praise you for your grace and presence, and we thank you for the privilege of serving our city. Lord, we turn to you for strength, and we pray that you would grant each one of us wisdom in our service. Lord, we give thanks for the bright and creative, supportive spirit of all our staff. We ask for your guiding hand of comfort placed over our troops and their families. In your name, amen.
Amen. Good evening, everybody. As you all know, we have Mayor Kavanaugh is absent and on a much-needed vacation with his family, so I'd ask for a motion to excuse Mayor Kavanaugh.
Second.
First from Councilmember Sousa, and a second from Councilmember Lord. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Passes 6-0. This evening, we don't have any communications, if I'm informed correctly. Now's the time for citizen comments and appearances from the floor. This is the time for citizens who would like to address the City Council on any non-agenda item.
Excuse me, Mr. Vice Mayor, you passed over the expenditures.
Yeah.
Oh,
Expenditures.
I apologize. Thank you. And I appreciate everybody's tolerance in my first actions this evening. I rolled right through that. Okay. Approve and or ratify the expenditures. I'll ask for a motion if there's one.
Mr. Vice Mayor? Yes, I've read and reviewed all the expenditures and find them in order, so I move they be accepted as presented.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Sousa, second from Lord.
And I have a question on this first item on page 1, on page 7, but page 1 of the accounts. It shows departments blank, and it shows $359,647.92. What is that for? That doesn't show
Page.
what department that.
As we prepare this,
Can I just clarify real quick? On the first page of the expenditures, we have the summary report.
Right.
Councilman Cavalier is referring to the $359,647.92 on the very first page.
Account summary.
Very first line.
Very first page, first line.
Oh, good.
Sorry, department was blank.
yes,
You've got it.
we have a category of expenditures as we put that summary together for those items that don't go to a specific department. For example, income tax withheld from checks would be paid into that category because it's not an expense, it's a liability when we collect it. Also, refunds goes into that category. The report that we give you is a very brief summary of our accounts payable that's required by the ordinances. I get a much more detailed report at the time it's presented to you, and that's at about an 8-point font at 44 pages, and I'm not sure it's any more readable other than I can come up to those same totals. But it really, we're working on trying to get a better way of communicating to you what those accounts payable are without giving you a ton of volume on that. Appreciate any comments you have.
But I think it should be labeled something.
It's
Because blank tells me nothing.
We'll label it non-departmental in the future, and that might give a clear indication to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Cavalier.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry. Got a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
All those against? 6-0 passes. Now's the time for communications. If I've been told correctly, I don't believe we have any. Okay. And citizen comments and appearances from the floor. This is time for citizens who would like to address the City Council on any non-agenda item. The Council will listen to comments, but may take any one of the following: respond to criticism, request that staff investigate and report on the matter, or request that the matter be scheduled on a future agenda. Do we have any cards this evening from any individuals? No cards? Any citizens on the floor that wish to address the Council? Seeing none, I'll move on to consent. Ask the clerk to read consent items A through K by title only.
Item A, council will consider approving draft minutes of a special meeting held on September 4th, 2007, a work session held on September 4th, 2007, a work session held on September 10th, 2007, and a regular meeting held on September 10th, 2007. B, council will consider approving the map of dedication for Los Ventanas, Unit 1, dedicating rights-of-way for portions of Yuma Road, 183rd Avenue, and West Durango Street within the Los Ventanas planned area development. Item C, council will consider approving an agreement with TWJ Associates Limited Partnerships to acquire extinguishment credits for a total cost of $119,385 and authorize the city manager to execute all documents. D, council will consider approving the map of dedication for McDowell Road, Commercial Corridor Improvement District infrastructure, dedicating rights-of-way for portions of West Monte Vista Drive and North 150th Drive within the Goodyear Planned Regional Center Planned Development Area. Item E, council will consider approving the map of dedication for McDowell Road, Commercial Corridor Improvement District, Bullard Wash, dedicating right-of-way for portions of Bullard Wash within the Goodyear Planned Regional Center Planned Area Development. Item F, council will consider approving the final plat for the market at Estrella Falls, subdividing 66.3 acres into 8 commercial lots within the Goodyear Planned Regional Center Planned Area Development, subject to stipulations. G, council will consider approving a contract with CH2M Hill, Inc. in the amount of $329,402 for a brine injection well feasibility study and authorize the city manager to execute all documents. Item H, council will consider approving the final plat for Estrella Falls Regional Shopping Center, subdividing 147.93 acres into 10 commercial lots within the Goodyear Planned Regional Center Planned Area Development, subject to stipulations. Item I, council will consider approving the map of dedication for Amaranth Area 1 Front Street, dedicating rights-of-way for portions of Front Street, 70th Drive, and 75th Avenue within the Amaranth Planned Area Development. Item J, council will consider approving Resolution 07-1181 to establish the Goodyear Higher Educational Advisory Committee. Council will consider approving Ordinance 07-1088, establishing a sister city commission. Council will consider approving Ordinance 07-1089, establishing a youth commission. Item K, council will consider accepting the right-of-way dedication by special warranty deed of a portion of Bullard Wash south of Interstate 10.
Is there anyone in the public that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there anyone on council that wishes to remove an item from consent? None? I could have a motion to approve the consent.
So moved.
Got a motion? I'll second. Motion from Councilmember Cavalier.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Holland. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Antoniak. Mayor Antoniak.
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Lord.
Aye.
Passed 6-0.
Moving on to item 8A. Mr. Kulik, you've got a presentation for us this evening on an ordinance for accessible features for the disabled. Sorry, go ahead.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. The ordinance proposed tonight is at the direction of Vice Mayor Antoniak, amending our ordinance for single-family dwellings to request home builders provide accessible features in all single-family homes. The second part of the amendment would be to require all general space and rooms made available to the general public to be accessible as well. And the final portion of the amendment would require model complexes with 2 or less models be fully accessible for the home buyers to visit. It's the desire of the city to provide accessible housing throughout the community. The proposed ordinance is supported by the Central Home Builders Home Home Builders Association, as well as City of Phoenix and Mesa, had the same ordinance. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
How would everybody like to handle this? Does anybody have specific questions you'd rather have before there's a motion on the floor?
So I just have one, just for clarification. I just wanted to, I couldn't understand when we were doing this ordinance that, and to require that model home complexes containing 2 or less dwelling units be accessible. Can't we just say all? I mean, is there some, there must be some specific reason why it's worded in this way.
The cost burden, it was a big cost burden on the home builders, but they considered if it was a small complex that they could afford that in their construction. Otherwise, it's the sales office and the first model is always accessible.
Okay. So it was better to be just very specific about it rather than to say they will all be accessible, whether they have one model home or 20.
Yes, it was a compromise we reached with the Home Builders
Okay.
Association.
Yeah, it was just the wording that just kind of left me cold there. Okay, I understand, thank you.
My only comment is my experience with this, because I sold when we had this kind of ordinance in the city, and it is costly for the builder to put it in all the model homes. So I think it's a great compromise that, pick 2 out of them and do that, especially the business model home, which is essentially very important, so they can get in there and do the business.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion, folks. If somebody wants to make a motion.
We need to read the
Oh,
ordinance.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm not following my script, can you tell? Ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title before I take a motion. Yeah. Everybody's
Good
ready.
idea.
Ordinance 07-1086, amending Section 9-1-1 of Article 9-1 of Chapter 9 of the City of Goodyear Code by amending Chapter 11 of the International Building Code 2006 edition, which was adopted except as modified by Ordinance 07-1071 on May 14, 2007, to address accessibility issues related to Group R Division 3 occupancies, providing for repeal of existing provisions of the City of Goodyear Code, providing for separability, and providing for an effective date.
Before I get a motion, is there any comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, I'd ask for a motion on the ordinance as read. Councilmember Cavalier, did you?
Well, if you want me to,
You
I
can
move
raise
that
your
we
hand.
adopt ordinance 07-1086 as read by the clerk.
And I'll second.
Motion from Councilmember Cavalier and second by Councilmember Holland. Councilmember Cavalier, did you have
Yeah,
a question or
I
comment?
do have some questions on this. What does this mean, in every home that's built now in Goodyear, it will have to have accessibility for the disabled? Is that what it means?
No, it means that the home builder will provide the option to modify options for the home buyer to have the home modified with accessible features.
I thought we had that.
Can I enlighten you a little bit about why I brought
Please
this
do.
up? And I didn't load the deck tonight to ask this to be first on the agenda, but I had a conversation with a constituent over the summertime, and I was aware of this ordinance that existed in Phoenix and in Mesa and even some other cities within the valley. We had a constituent, for the sake of the home builder and the development, I'll leave it unnamed, but we had a constituent put down money on a home, had the option to put accessible features. This was a veteran that now is a paraplegic, that his life had drastically changed and was trying to get a home actually close to one of our fire stations, one of our newer fire stations, and was moving down the path and then had the plans essentially pulled out from underneath him and said, nope, we can't put that in, it's too costly, excuse to the point they gave up, went to somebody that would do it for them. So that's kind of where this came from. It was a very heartfelt concern from the spouse of this constituent who now is trying to care for him and get his wheelchair in and out of the house. And I had known that Phoenix had been doing this in at least one model home out of a complex of 3 and had been offering it. And it just seemed like a disservice, especially given the circumstances of that particular story. So that's That's where it came from.
Does that cover,
That doesn't mean they
two-story
don't have an
homes?
expense. That doesn't mean that they
But I
don't
mean,
have an expense. with the
What
option.
about a two-story home? Does that mean they put an elevator in?
If, that could be a request of the home buyer, if they were willing to pay that expense, the home builder could offer that.
But probably they wouldn't.
But it's like a list of options that you can choose from, right? It's not that they're
Well,
required.
my house has it. I mean, we built our house so that it would have, you can take a wheelchair into everywhere, including the shower. I mean, it's fixed up so that it's for
You own a
disabled.
custom-built home, right?
But it was a custom-built
Yes,
home,
well,
right,
this
but
is
I-
production-built homes, and in production-built homes, across the country, they do this. And I have to say, good on you. I was unaware we didn't have that.
I was too,
In the
totally.
ordinance, so, it's just something that's,
To a point,
I mean, 20 years ago, I was doing this, guys, and, people have to have access into model homes to be able to at least look at the demonstrations they have. And they have to have the counters lowered when they buy, and, I mean, there's just a sundry of things in the house that you have to change. They have to pay for it, but with the builder knowing that he has to have this, for them, he then can go out and look at different contractors and talk about this, and sort of have some business plan that he will know. Generally, the sales rep will kind of have an idea what it will cost the individual for having these adjustments in the house. So it's really,
This cost is on the buyers.
it's on the buyer.
Oh, okay,
On the
that's
buyer.
right. Okay.
But it's the point of going into the model home, just like when you go into all those great models and see all the upgrades, and you're like, where's the house that shows just the basic plan? So it's kind of,
See, we had to have a ramp somewhere in all our model homes, when we had to have double doors where a wheelchair could get through. We had to have a restroom in the model home that a wheelchair could get through. So there were just finite things like that, just in a model home that are beneficial to the person that has a problem.
Okay.
Mr. Susi, you had a question?
Thank you. I certainly think it's important that the provision is provided, basically for one reason, from my standpoint, with the situation that we're in right now with the returning veterans who have been injured and who have been handicapped and fall into these categories. I think it's appropriate for us to have this type of ordinance in place to accommodate these individuals. Ed, do you have any idea what the additional cost would be to modify a standard home to make availability to, let's say, the minimal standard?
Just
for
the
handicapped?
basic standards, it'd be somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000.
That's substantial cost.
Well, you're talking about doorways, bathrooms, the kitchen counters, so there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done, but it would be well worth
Would
it.
it not depend, it'd depend on the unique circumstances of
Right,
of
you
the
could
individual
pick-
that was requesting the changes. I mean, some folks may have a wheelchair but not confined to it, so they need the doors widened but not the counters lowered, or, maybe they want to get a scooter in and out of the house and aren't necessarily confined to it, and so they might want a wider doorway and wider hallways, but not necessarily some other drastic features.
Correct. It depends on the severity of your disability, the options that you would choose.
I want to commend the Vice Mayor for bringing this to the attention of the building department. And, I think it's an excellent.
It was a constituent, honestly.
Well,
It was
yeah,
just
but you
it was one of
promoted it,
those
so
things.
that's a good move. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Obviously, I support it, so I'll ask for a roll call vote from the clerk.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Lord.
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne.
aye.
Mayor Antoniak.
Aye. I've messed up a few times tonight, too. All right. Thank you, Ed. and Thank you for your quick work on that. Item 8B, this item is to consider adoption of a wireless communications ordinance zoning text amendment. Farhad will present to us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Antoniak, members of the council and the public. The action item before you is a proposal to amend the section in the zoning ordinance that addresses wireless communications facilities. And the purpose of this amendment is threefold. Number one is to modify the development standards according to the current technological standards and advances. Second, to streamline the review procedures for staff. And also, as kind of a kind of ancillary to those two is to provide some further clarification, further expand on some of the provisions in the ordinance that to some might appear to be vague. So having said that, I was going to highlight some of the current provisions in the ordinance and then explain how we are proposing to amend those provisions. So if you refer to Section 4-2-4, Sections A and B of the zoning ordinance, and I provided some legislative revisions as an attachment to my COAC.
4-2-4?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, I got
Sections
you.
A and B.
Yeah.
The zoning ordinance currently requires that all wireless communications facilities be reviewed by staff through a site plan review process. Now, that is regardless of whether it requires a use permit to be approved by the City Council or not. There are some wireless communication facilities that, if they meet certain criteria, they can be reviewed administratively, and those are usually the facilities that are less obvious to the public. So typically what happens is when we receive an application, a special use application for a wireless communication facility, let's say, just for purposes of giving an example, a 65-foot monopalm, as many of you have seen before. We would review the special use permit application, we being staff, and when we feel it's right, staff will come before the commission and council for review. Following approval from City Council of the special use permit application, at this point, staff would still require a formal site plan review. Now, because we typically require a site plan with the use permit application, we believe that requiring another site plan where the vast majority of the information that's on the use permit application is included in the site plan, we believe that's a little redundant. So one of the things that we're proposing is we would come before the commission and council with what we would call a preliminary development plan for the wireless communication facility. Granted that development plan is approved by council, it would become a site plan for staff to review and make sure that they are according to the stipulations that City Council has approved as an attachment to that, as a condition to that special use permit approval. It would be staff's responsibility to review against those stipulations and stamp it approved only when those stipulations are met or reflected on the site plan. So that's one of the purposes of the site plan or this amendment that we're proposing. Another section in that wireless communication facilities ordinance, and also in section 4, addresses height limitations depending on what district the proposed facility would be located in. And what the zoning ordinance dictates is that the height limitation for a wireless communication facility in a commercial district be limited to 30 feet. If it's an industrial district, it would be limited to 40 feet. However, there's a specific provision in the ordinance that says that the applicant may be waived if there's an expressed waiver request to the City Council. I would say the vast majority of the time the applicants do make that waiver request, and therefore the application is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so we're proposing to eliminate the height restriction on those and have the council reviewed on a case-by-case basis and take a look at the proximity of that facility to surrounding land uses. Kind of ancillary to all that, as I mentioned earlier, are a few cleanup items, cleaning up a few of the provisions to clarify further certain requirements. And also just in one instance, we are relocating a provision that speaks about wireless communication facilities that are 35 feet or greater, in which case they require a use permit. We're just simply moving that to a section that we think is more appropriate, and that is the section that talks about commercial wireless communication facilities, and that would be in Section 8. With that, I will conclude my comments and open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Farhad. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title only.
Ordinance 07-1087, amending section 4-2-4, wireless communication facilities, Article 8-3, height limitations, and Article 8-5, miscellaneous, of the City of Goodville zoning ordinance, adopted May 24th, 1999, as amended, to modify the development standards and streamline the review procedures for commercial wireless communications facilities, providing separability and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Good. Go on.
I move to adopt ordinance 07-1087 as read by the city clerk.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Lord, second by Councilmember Sousa. Discussion, Councilmember Lord, would you like to, do you have anything to say? You made the motion. Councilmember Sousa?
Yes, Mr. Farron, so we're going to maintain the heights that we had, the 35 and the 40-foot heights. And then if anything is above that, then that will come to council to decide whether or not we're going to permit anything above that. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor Antoniak, Councilmember Sousa, we are actually eliminating the height restrictions, particularly in the section where it mentions what heights would be required depending on what zoning district a proposed facility would be at. The burden is on the applicant to demonstrate that whatever height they are proposing is the necessary height to address the needs of its customers. So that being said, the council will also be making the determination whether or not the applicant has demonstrated that, for example, a 65-foot tall monopole is appropriate in this case rather than a 55-foot monopole. So the height will be considered on a case-by-case basis during the review process.
So then every case then is going to be coming to the council then for review?
Correct. Any wireless communication facility that features a structure that is 35 feet or greater will certainly come before the Planning and Zoning Commission or the
But
council.
you're telling me that you're not mentioning that at all in the ordinance, the 35 feet. Didn't you just tell me that?
Vice Mayor Antoniak, Councilmember Sousa, what I mentioned was what we are eliminating is the height restrictions depending on whatever zoning district that the wireless communication facility would be located in. For example, in a commercial district, currently the zoning ordinance says 30 feet is your limit unless there's an express request for a waiver to the city council. Okay. Independent of that is the 35-foot threshold, which determines whether or not an item will come before you for special use permit approval or not. So anything greater than 35 feet will definitely go through the public review process.
Let me take another stab at this, Councilmember Sousa. Anything that is above 35 feet today we see comes before us.
Right.
The reality is everything that's being asked of the city is always above 35 feet. So why have the height ordinance in there to begin with and bring everything to us? That's
correct.
A good way to say it?
That's correct. A much more succinct way of saying it.
Does that make?
Well, I still think that, for an understanding on the part of people that are applying, that there should be where do we go from here? It's 35 feet is what the city is saying. And anything above that, you're going to have to go before the council.
No.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Councilmember Osborne has a I think a comment maybe related to the same.
If I'm not mistaken, for at least the last 3 years, where we've had a slew of these come through, they've been at least 55 to 65 feet. I can't even recall the 30-footers. So, my comment was just keep up the good work of the ones that are creative, like the monopole. My favorite one is that one by Skyway Church that looks like the big bell tower. You have no idea that's those are great. But truly, everything we've seen has been at least 65 feet. So I think it's a good idea.
Let me come back to Councilmember Sousa real quick.
I'm comfortable with it. It's okay. How much demand is there for new towers of this height, these heights?
Vice Mayor Antoniak, Commissioner Sousa, I'd say in the last 2 years, maybe we came before you with anywhere between 8 to 10 special use permit requests for brand-new wireless communication facilities as opposed to co-locating against an existing vertical structure, which requires only administrative review.
Are we getting demands from companies to build additional towers in the city?
Absolutely. I believe in the last couple of years, we've received applications from just about every major mobile phone operator in the country.
Would these additional towers improve the services to the subscribers within the city of Goodyear?
They would, yes. Staff believes that many of them that have come before you are justified in proposing the heights that have been required and the number of antennas.
Okay. And I do note in the ordinance itself that this precludes any type of signage on the towers themselves. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor Antonia, Councilmember Sousa, it would preclude any type of, for example, commercial signage, but it does allow the opportunity to provide any type of public safety related signage, such as keep out or no trespassing.
Well, yeah, but I mean itself, on the tower itself.
It does preclude signage on the tower.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
Although I'm sure next week we'll see a pylon sign along the freeway with a cell tower now incorporated in it.
You had to bring up that
Couldn't help
word, huh?
myself. Sorry.
No comment.
Councilmember Lord, Councilmember Cavalier, all right. No further discussion. I'll call for the vote from the clerk.
Councilmember Lord?
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne?
Aye.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Antoniak?
Aye.
Passed 6-0.
On the information items, is there any information items from
Oh, yeah.
members of council?
Oh, yeah. Very important one. Okay. It's a good year for Goodyear, and it's a good year for the Cleveland Indians. They have attained first place in their division. How about that? World Series time.
That's right. That's right. They're good years. The year they picked us. Councilmember Lord? No. Osborne? Back over here. Cavalier. You guys will belabor me for about 3 minutes. I just want to give you a brief, just kind of a brief report. I'm sure Mario and I will both put our heads together and give you something more formal in writing. But as many of you know in the staff, Mario Salamando from staff and myself were in Washington, D.C. last week. We were joined by Mayor Lopez Rogers and Mayor Bryant of Avondale and Buckeye, respectively, and their fellow staff members. On Wednesday, we met with a number of members of our congressional delegation and our staff, as well as a representative of the governor's office back in Washington, D.C. I think I pretty much nailed all of them right there. Obviously, hot topic that we discussed was current events in the Southwest Valley, specifically related to transportation funding and issues surrounding that. No big news to report on that, other than the $500,000 that remains in both the Senate and House versions of the transportation bill. Right? Am I saying that correctly? Which we can give you more details on if you want to advocate for that with your local congressional office or senator's office or back in D.C. We'll get those details over to you. So we heard a little bit of good news, but that, obviously there's not much of we also recognize there's not much of an attitude or an appetite for earmarks back in D.C. right now. And so everybody is watching those really, really diligently, and given that we have a mixed delegation between Representative Grijalva and Representative Franks, Congressman Franks and Congressman Grijalva, pardon me, representing us, we'll see. So we'll see what happens in the transportation bill. Wednesday evening into Friday at about 2 o'clock, we moved straight into Luke Air Force Base issues, and we were joined by the mayors of Glendale. We were joined by Doc Sullivan, a colleague of ours on the Surprise City Council, Supervisor Max Wilson, and am I missing any? Oh, Councilmember Claude Maddox from the City of Phoenix. And I think I got them all. So the 7 of us, along with, again, some staff, and hired folks that we have back in D.C. through an organization called the West Valley Partners, proceeded to then advocate for Luke Air Force Base and the issues surrounding Luke Air Force Base. Obviously, we all dealt with that issue during the base realignment and closure a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and we want to make sure we maintain those relationships as it relates to Luke Air Force Base. A number of military affairs, military construction, both Senate military staff members on the committees from both chambers joined us on Thursday. Senator Kyle was gracious enough to give us probably about 30 minutes of his time and talking to all of us about Luke Air Force Base. Congressman Franks started off the morning, and then we had representatives from Gifford's office, and I know I'm going to miss some. I got to look at my list now. I have to do it not from memory. Congressman Mitchell's office, Congressman Pastor's office. Actually, Congressman Pastor, being a family guy, was trying to make his way back to Phoenix and couldn't get past us because we caught him in the tunnel between the two chambers. So we hit him up in the hallway. And then Congressman Shadegg. So all of them joined us, along with some folks from the Government Accountability Office and even Border Patrol Office. And we heard very reassuring things about Luke Air Force Base from the congressional delegation. I would say they were cautiously optimistic about Luke Air Force Base in terms of the elected offices as well as the staffers that were up on the Hill, but really talked specifically about financing issues with all the way down to the runway project on Luke Air Force Base to funds, REPI funds, and that is some great government acronym, which Mario can email us all, but talking about acquisition of development rights around Luke Air Force Base. And so we heard there's $30 million sitting out there. So if you know anybody in the Air Force, encourage them to use it. We want to definitely encourage them to partner with the localities and those folks to ensure the development rights and a variety of other things are protected around the base. Friday, we moved on to the Pentagon, and I would say this was probably the most optimistic message I've heard about Luke Air Force Base in my 7 years involved in civic government here in Goodyear, from my days on the general plan to now sitting here with you all. And we started off the morning with General Mosley. He's the Chief of the Air Force. If you don't understand military structure, that guy's the CEO of the Air Force. Anybody and everybody in the Air Force answers to him. He answers to the Joint Chief of Staff, who obviously answers to the President. And he had on his calendar, I think, 30 minutes. We were called the morning of, told we were going to get 15, and an hour and plus later, he left the room. Very, very excited that we came out there, that we visited him. I think we all, our jaws dropped after he left the room, not only from spending an hour with him, but hearing such a positive, reinforced message that this is their schoolhouse. They look at this as a very important asset to the Air Force and to the United States, and the longevity. I mean, I felt very confident that the longevity of Luke Air Force Base, as long as we are responsible with our development as cities around this base, as long as we are responsible, we stay diligent, we keep schools out of the noise lines and even buffered further if we can, and a variety of other things, that we'll have Luke Air Force Base till my kids are going to see air shows there and visiting and having probably the same conversations we are today. So we finished off the day with General Chandler, which some of you may know. I believe he was stationed out here in the late 90s, early 2000 time period. So we finished off the day with him. We had a variety of ranks in between, a 4-star. And we started off with a 4-star. We ended with a 3-star. I was obviously very impressed by the not only accessibility for local elected officials to step into the Pentagon, which my experience on the Pentagon, outside of passing it on the Metro the dozen times I've been to D.C., has been through movies. But being able to step in there and have a very frank, candid conversation with a variety of officials from the Air Force, both from a citizen staff level all the way up to the Chief of the Air Force, was not only humbling but reassuring. I made a comment today to somebody in passing that I didn't see a single person in the Pentagon that didn't want to be there. So that's that. It was a very, very eventful trip. Very, very eventful.
Well, thank you for your report. The only disturbing item that you're coming back with is the $500,000 for transportation. You know, I see highways, senators getting money for highways that go nowhere, that end nowhere, you know, and to me, $500,000 is a pit. Did they give you any reason for
Well,
that amount?
let me clarify. $5 million was requested, so it wasn't as if. And Mario, you may want to elaborate on this, but $5 million was requested. Obviously, there's a lot of back and forth going on as it relates to earmarks this year. I'll let you jump in there, Mario.
Yeah, we're working with House and Senate staff right now on that appropriation for 08. But right now, it is an account that's a discretionary account, so that is above the line. So we have a shot at $500,000 to offset that local impact for the project for 08.
Which, given current affairs, is significant when you think about spreading it around. Maybe not.
So we'll continue to lobby.
Depending on our opinions.
Well, of course, we don't live in West Virginia, we don't live in Alaska, so I guess that leaves us on the short end.
That's very okay. But you know, I finished on a bit tugging note there, but I mean, honestly, back to the Pentagon. You know, I don't think we all maybe we don't comprehend this, but you know, it's a tough issue that's going on right now. But the men and women that have signed up in the last 7 years have known, the professionals that have signed up have known what they're getting into, and I definitely saw that in the Pentagon. I mean, there was, and I also felt very, very safe when I left there as well. So. Anyway, we'll get you more details about the thing, and I believe the West Valley Partners will be getting back together to brief the base and brief some others about what we did there. But you know, it was definitely a good trip. And on that note, manager summary, Attorney West.
Mr. Vice Mayor and Council, have a couple of items. Bear with me for a couple of minutes. First is I'm very pleased to announce that we released the request for qualifications for a 40-acre development of City Center and also for the Performing Arts Center. Those went out today. Those will be due back to us on October 24th, so we are moving ahead and looking forward to that. Along those lines, on October 9th, the council will be hearing the draft master plan for City Center that will be coming before you in a work session, immediately preceding the council meeting. So a lot of moving parts on this, but good news is we're moving forward. We're not taking the foot off the accelerator. As it relates to other council meetings, on October 1st, at this point, we do not have a planned work session. So we're looking ahead. We will have some, obviously, in October. But October 1st, at this point, no work session planned. And again, we will have a work session on City Center combined with the City Council meeting on October the 9th. A couple other items. One is just to, and it's been shared by a lot of people, but the outpouring of support for Harvey Krause has been phenomenal. I want to recognize certainly the mayor, vice mayor, and council and staff with the outpouring that Harvey's received through this very difficult time. So with the loss of his wife. Two other things. I don't know, and I was at a conference last week, so I don't know if we had an opportunity to announce Joe Schmidt's returning to us. Is that announced? But Joe, welcome back. We'll be joining Bob Coons as one of the planning managers, so a great team we have in place. So it's good to have you back, Joe.
Welcome back, Joe.
The other is Nora Fasabelli. I don't know if you've been introduced to council formally, but Nora has joined us as our media relations and assistant public information officer. And she came to us from the Southwestern. I know she has a law degree also, so and a lot of background in media. So it's a pleasure to have you on board. And the last item I had is the State Transportation Board met last Friday. Mr. Rourke Massey and also Ms. Lori Hillebrands were there representing us. Rourke, I don't know if you have a quick update on that.
You probably already.
I'm going to keep my mouth quiet during this. So
I know you've declared a conflict of it.
Yes, I have.
But I think you're safe for a quick update. Lori and I traveled up to the State Transportation Board on Friday. You've probably already heard through the media and other sources that the State Transportation Board continued consideration of the STAN money reimbursement to the various parties on the Highway Acceleration Program for approximately 15 days so they could seek a legal opinion from their staff attorney on various aspects of the enabling legislation on the allocation of those funds. So we're on hold for at least 15 more days until the Transportation Board can meet again and consider that item. It's our understanding that they may not wait until their next meeting, which is approximately 30 days out, but they may hold a telephonic meeting to consider that item. We're waiting to hear the exact date on that. In the meantime, the attorneys are going to continue to work to try to hammer out the IGA. We have 5 attorneys from 5 agencies and cities involved, so a lot of moving parts on that. We're hoping to finalize that in the next few days. But that's kind of the update on I-10 at this point.
On that note, summary of follow-up actions, I just had the one for Larry to add to his finance report.
Mr. Vice Mayor, that's correct. That's all we had.
All right. Any inquiries of staff? On that note, everybody be safe out there and have a good night. Meeting is adjourned.